Las Vegas, Nevada, where the Reverend Jesse Jackson spoke at the National League of Cities annual meeting.
Thank you very much. Let me express to all of you my sincere delight for having the opportunity to share with you on this occasion. President Kathy Reynolds, to President Plum, to all of you who've come here from around the nation, it would indeed be appropriate at this hour where many of us are still in a state of mourning and trauma and shock because of the death of Harold Washington, one of the great urban giants of our day or any day. It would be appropriate for us to stand just for a moment in reverence and commemoration the life and legacy of Harold Washington, shall we? Amen. To the distinguished officers of this organization, to Sharp James and Sidney Bartholomew, who worked so diligently and effectively and helping to coordinate our schedule to make this a very important appearance. To Mayor Richard Hatcher, just a pearl of a gentleman and a public servant who will be honored while you're here in session. To Ralph Anderson and the Greenville, South Carolina contingent, the ultimate city. Speaking of cities, Greenville, South Carolina. Let me express to you that I have a sense of your anguish over not having other candidates to come to this convention. I know how it feels to have a sense of rejection and feel that you really don't count. But it's just good to know that when you're down and out, that there's somebody who does care. And just as I rescued Goodman from Syria and rescued Americans from Cuba, I'm here, so just be delighted. Rescue is on the way. Today I want to talk about a call to justice, a new direction, revive the war on poverty, illiteracy, disease, homelessness, and drugs. One to lead this nation must have a vision of the cities, the repositories of our culture. President Johnson had a vision of the cities, President Nixon a vision of the suburbs, and President Reagan a vision of the ranch and outer space. Different visions. Left to President Reagan, there would be no Christmas. He would have detained the wise men, denied Mary and Joseph a right to sue for open housing or housing discrimination. He would have denied Joseph access to the carpenters' union. He's so anti-union. He would have relegated them to the stable and no aid to weatherize the stable. Jesus may have caught pneumonia under him. No prenatal care, no Head Start, no daycare for Mary or Jesus. No school nutrition program, and then would have blown the Star of Bethlehem out the sky with Star Wars. It's time for one to assume leadership who has a vision of the cities. the cities are in a state of federal neglect. A withdrawal of support from the cities by our federal government, a shifting of our tax base to the suburbs, jobs offshore. All too often the cities have become likened unto those trapped in the hole in the donut. We must rebuild houses, health care, infrastructure, sewers, mass transportation, a health care safety net, but not just rebuild cities, because the neglect has been so deep and so pervasive. We must also rebuild people. Many people have surrendered to despair. Liquor, drugs, violence. Their grapes of buoyancy, sweetness, and potentiality have become raisins of despair. The sun was eclipsed at high noon. In their formative years, so many of our children never had a chance. Born in stress, deprived at birth, no daycare, no Head Start, no adequate nutritional diet, sleep in cold houses at night, go to school not so much to learn, but to get warm, to get a meal, then go to sleep, fall behind, become disheartened, and drop out. They never had a chance. What must we do to win, to make a difference? We who would lead the people must revive their spirits, renew their faith, make them equal to the task and the challenge. We must first expand the political process. 1984, 85 million Americans had the right to vote and voted for no one. They surrendered. They saw no correlation between their vote and a house, health care, education, jobs, or transportation. They concluded they'll run it. Their spirits were broken. We must convince them that they do count. In 1960, John Kennedy beat Nixon by 112,000 votes. Less than one vote per precinct. Every vote does count. First time Congressman Conyers ran, he won by 37 votes. Every vote does count. Humphrey lost to Nixon by 550,000 votes. Fewer than 700,000 voters determined two presidents in 8 years. In 1960, we won by the margin of our hope. In 1968, we lost by the margin of our despair. In 1984, when so many people withdrew and surrendered, many of our competitors turned to Reaganomics. I turned to registration. Those 2 million new voters gave us a New South coalition. And that New South coalition beat Bork. But that's just the beginning. It can also beat right to work laws. It can also pass ERA. It can also raise minimum wage. That New South coalition can set the pace for jobs, peace, and justice in our nation. We must first expand the participation. Secondly, we must build a coalition. We will not inherit one. or have one bequeathed to us, we must build a coalition where people's interests converge, though their backgrounds may be diverse. The common ground point where people meet. When I grew up in Greenville, South Carolina, oftentimes grandmama couldn't buy a blanket, didn't have credit, we didn't freeze, and she didn't complain. She reached back and get old pieces of coat and shirt and dress, slip, croaker sack, lay them out on the cart of the table. Red, yellow, brown, black, blue, polka dot, stripe, art, patches, pieces, colors, and sizes. When they were apart, they were just rags, strips, hardly fit to wipe your shoes off with. But great mayors, great leaders, she didn't stop there. The sturdy hand and strong cord, she turned rags and strips into a quilt. A thing of beauty and warmth and security. Leaders must pick up the pieces and build a coalition of farmers and workers and men and women and black and white and haves and have-nots. We must build the coalition to be worthy of the title called leader. As we build on vital points. What must we do in this campaign to make a difference down where you live? Now, I was contemplating running in 1983. I had a meeting with George Wallace. He said, Jesse, I think that your mind is not made up that you really ought to run. Because if you got a point of view and you can argue your case, you ought to run. The only way you'll get your message out is to take your case to the people. But when you run and the writers begin to write and the cameras begin to roll, keep your message down low where the goats can get it. Keep the message plain. What must we do to make a difference where you live? We must stop drugs from coming into America and stop jobs from going out. The federal government can be a major player. Stop drugs from coming in. Stop jobs from going out. Secure our farms. Clean up our environment. End discrimination based on race, sex, or religion, and achieve peace. When you really hear the people, as I go from Iowa to Cicero, Illinois, from Mississippi to Maine, people who never really meet each other have so much in common. They've been taught that their interests conflict when they converge. Mayors, farmers are saying they want fair prices. Supply management, market, and return their land. Workers are saying we want fair wages, markets, and return our jobs. What is Cargill violating the farmers? A G and GM violating the workers? Those farmers and those workers have more in common than they do in conflict. We must pull together. Workers who want fair wages, farmers who want fair prices, peace activists who want peace. That's such a correlation between jobs, peace, and justice. You can't just be the mayor of your town, your city, as it were, anymore. We used to export a third of our grain to Latin America. We also exported tractors there and infrastructure. As their debt went up, so did our deficit. Now they have to pay back banks and IMF. They can't buy grain. The farmers have surplus. They can't buy tractors. Your workers lose their jobs. And so I said to a group of farmers, I said, we got to fight for our interests in Central America. They said, you're right, Jesse. Let's fight for our interests. I said, now, is our interest really in chasing 3 million Sandinistas and feeding 15,000 countries, or is our interest in feeding 400 million? Is our interest really in expanding a market for grain and tractors and steel and rail and medicine? Next door to us, Latin America, we hear 3 million Sandinistas, but not much about 85 million Mexicans. 400 million neighbors, allies, customers. Cities, our choice for jobs, peace, and justice. It's a way to make our cities grow because it allows that which we produce to have a market. Workers, farmers, peace activists, environmentalists who want to stop the deforestation of Brazil and the polluting of our air all have everything in common and almost nothing in conflict. In the cities, you must not meet blatant neglect with passive resistance. You must not meet blatant neglect with passive resistance. You must not have another line in the paper complaining about who is not here as if you are a jilted lover. You must support who is here, and let's go to higher ground. Why are we in this mess? It's no mystery. David Stockman explained it in his book. Reaganomics pushed cities and services for American poor and seniors and children off of the burner. How did we get in this mess? We doubled the military budget in peacetime. We cut taxes for the wealthy and corporations. Money went out, money didn't come in, equals a deficit. Reagan sold two basic propositions. His proposition was that we had a weak military and couldn't afford economic justice. The fact is, we must afford economic justice, and we have a strong military. We have a strong military, we have weak leadership. We got guided missiles and misguided leadership. We have the capacity to overkill the world many times over, and not the good sense to take care of our senior citizens who need hearing aids, glasses and dentures, who too often must choose between heat or rent, medicine or food. Strong military, weak leadership. Our boys in Lebanon were strong. They never had a chance. They were killed while they slept. Weak policy. And while they were being brought back home in those steel boxes, we invaded Grenada, a nation without a standing army, and lost 37 of our young men. Strong military, weak leadership. Now, friends, I want to bring some challenges to Reaganomics and work out the contradictions. It does not make sense to me to be closing farms in America, 650,000 family farms closing, and all that farmers use, which are jobs to people who work in the cities, while importing food from foreign countries subsidized by the U.S. government. I don't understand that. It does not make sense to be escorting tankers at more than $1 million a day up and down the Persian Gulf while oil wells are capped in Louisiana, Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. That does not make sense. It does not make sense 40 years after the war, when Europe and Japan have surplus economies, to be spending $150 billion a year defending them when they're better able to share the burden when there are 5 million homeless people in America. That does not make sense. We should stop divesting from U.S. cities while investing in slave or repressed labor markets. I raised the Proposition 84, and everybody got this fascination about being mainstream. Mainstream. The problem with the mainstream, it's very narrow. You have to have a private canoe to get in it. I want to make a river, a broad river, where all the American people can be a part of the American dream. No more mainstream, broad river. Let everybody in. I said in 1984 and again in 87 that we can cut the military budget without cutting our defense. Oh my God, what are you saying? I said we can cut the military budget without cutting our defense. Henry Kissinger said we can cut 100,000 troops in Europe and still have 200,000 left. Some Democrats began to listen. They got some Republican validation. Secretary of Defense Colucci, new Secretary of Defense, said we can cut the military budget by $30 billion a year. Can't your cities use $30 billion a year? We never did intimidate the Russians with cost overruns and bloated budgets and sole source contractors. We have the strongest military in the history of the world. We got 13,000 nuclear warheads pointed at the Soviet Union. More than 25,000 in our arsenal. We're strong militarily. We do not need midget man missile at a $45 billion cost to say, well, it's mobile. The missiles in the Tridents are mobile. Those in the airplanes are mobile. We need 2 more aircraft carriers. I think not. We got 13, the Russians got 1. They want to build another 2 carriers at $40 billion. You can substantially wipe out poverty for every woman, infant, and child in America for less money than 2 excess aircraft carriers. Star Wars. We do not need, beyond research, a $500 billion to $1 trillion Star Wars program that will increase danger in the world and bankrupt planet Earth. We need leadership that's bold and clear. How can we get our budget balanced? Let's keep a strong military, but no excess bloat for unfounded fears. It's another side. How we got in this budget deficit? spending beyond military needs, beyond needs. I'm for needs. I'm not naive. I'm for strong military. But I find no consolation in guided missiles and misguided leadership. Let's look at the other side of it. They raised the question that make many Democrats dance. If you were president, that's supposed to make you freeze, you know. Would you raise taxes? I would stand for fair taxes. That means raise, so be it. To whom more is given, more is required. How did we get in this hole in the first place? Those who could afford to pay them didn't have to pay them. And those who couldn't pay them had to. That's why we're in the hole. Where are we going to find $23 billion? Close the loopholes in the estate taxes. $10 billion, and they're still wealthy off of money they inherited and did not work for. Keep the income tax bracket at 38%. For those making $250,000 a year or more, and they're still living pretty good, as opposed to 25%. That's another $24 billion, according to Congressman Jim Wright. Keep the corporate tax level at the 1980 level. That's another $25 billion. Let those who are able to pay the taxes pay their fair share for the privilege of keeping America strong. That's fair. That's fair. Some Democrats, you know, Graham, Rudman, Hollins, Simon, Gephardt, Gore, we wanna stop this hemorrhage. We're gonna have across-the-board cuts. We're gonna make it even and just stop spending. Now what that does is it freezes the wealthy in their wealth and the poor in their poverty. It cuts the fat from the rich and the bone marrow from the poor. It sounds even, but it's really an illusion. When they talk about Graham, Rudman, Hollins, it reminds me of ham and egg justice. Ham and egg sounds even. You say it so fast, sound like it come from the same animal. Put them on one slice of bread, cook them together, they blend. I mean, ham and eggs, ham and eggs. Now, that was once a national contest. Chicken and the hog got up on the table. Chicken didn't even debate about a ham and egg sandwich. Chicken just started cackling, dropped the egg, moved on. Hog started raising hell because hog had to give up a leg and could not move on. It sounded equal, but it was not equal. You're going to cut one man's extra Mercedes and yacht and cut another man's public transportation. That is not equal. It's not fair. There must be fairness in government, my friends. There must be fairness in government. Where are we going to get this money from? Cut the excess in the military budget? According to Mr. Kissinger and Mr. Carlucci, the corporations and the wealthy pay their share. But then let's be creative. Let us not run from revenue sharing and tax-exempt bonds and support funding for priority programs and community development block grants. We need them. We must have them. Well, where can we get some of this money from, Jesse? Well, let's think for a minute. Beyond cutting the military budget, the wealthy and corporations paying their share of taxes, we have $600 billion in public pension funds. Take 10 or 20%. Set aside, government guaranteed, fair return on investment. Use the workers' money to invest in rebuilding America. It's our money. The pension money should be as protected as FICA. A guy like Felix Roy from New York understands it very well. If we could think and bail out Chrysler with the workers' money, if we could bail out New York with the workers' money, if we could bail out Fannie Mae and Ginnie Mae, we can bail out urban America. Let's think our way out of this hole. It's our own money being used for our development. Don't worry about who is absent. Jesse Jackson to the rescue. There's a way out. Well, let's leave the government side for a moment, friends. Let's go to the private side. We're losing our jobs. It's not because people in cities don't want to work. I become very hesitant when people start talking about how to motivate the poor to work. That's the rich man's assumption that poor folks ain't motivated. Poor folks do the hardest work, nastiest work, most dangerous work, get through working, stealing property. Rich man said, well, you just need motivation. Folks cleaning out other folks' bedpans in hospitals, wiping the sweat and fever from other sick people, and they get sick and can't lie in the bed they made up every day. They don't need no motivation. They need minimum wage. They need to get paid for the work that they do. And the same folks that tell poor folks they just need motivation, they tell you in the cities, if you were better managers, you could run your cities better. It's the same game. Well, let's look at how the game is played. Last November, GM announced a big efficiency move. They're great on these words. It was an efficiency move. They were going to close 11 plants, 30,000 jobs for efficiency. That's a pretty good reason. The same week, they opened up 30,000 new jobs in South Korea. Oops. Now, follow me, friends. Don't get mad at the South Koreans. They didn't take jobs from us. Folks who don't have the right to vote, don't have the right to organize trade unions, can't take nothing from nobody. They did not take jobs from us. GM took jobs to them. Don't stop there. Biggest game in town. Buy America. Make you feel guilty if you don't. Brothers in Detroit got upset and killed Mr. Chen. Took him to court and they said we killed him because we thought he was a Japanese. They'd been driven insane because they've been listening to loud television, reading papers. Brother in Chicago got mad, took out a Magnum and shot a Toyota 12 times, locked him up on the other side, killing a car, foreign-made car. Drove him crazy. Because somebody told him the Asians took our job. Y'all, that didn't happen. The #1 exporter from Taiwan is not Taiwan. And y'all, even with the other candidates that come, they wouldn't be talking about this. This is good information and it's very fresh. GE, General Electric, is the #1 exporter from Taiwan, back home. GE closed down plants in America, take away our jobs, our capital, our tax base, our hopes, our dreams, take our jobs to Taiwan, make the product over there with cheap labor, sell it back home at high prices, bring an impersonal manager from another city, and if he tightens his belt and close the plant and don't return the mayor's call, he gets a bonus and a golden parachute to jump out the window of a burning building and land on soft grass. while the workers come out the basement screaming on a skateboard without ball bearings and crash. And that's legal. I tell you, it's economic violence. But don't stop there, friends. Between 81 and 83, and see people wondering why our cities are bankrupt and wondering why we're in a deficit. GE made $6 billion between 81 and 83. Paid no taxes, zero, zilch, none. Paid no taxes. Guess what? Got a $182 million tax rebate. While workers on unemployment compensation had to pay taxes. That's why you need Jesse Jackson for your president. I'll break up that madness. All this talk about how we're going to handle welfare people, how we're going to motivate welfare people. We need a little work fair, we need a little incentive. When workers are trapped between scab labor at home and slave labor abroad, workers in a crossfire. If in workers in Korea and Taiwan, if we negotiated labor rights with human rights, if we raised their standard of living, it will reduce the incentive to take our jobs. They make money, they can buy what we make. That will begin to even the playing field for the American worker. In other words, friends, right now, these multinationals have government incentives to merge corporations. And they close down the plant here, they get a tax break. And they get to an NICS, newly industrialized country, they get another tax break. They merge corporations, they purge workers, and they submerge the economy. With government support, we must shift the incentives. Give a worker a bonus when he saves a plant, when he expands the market. Make the incentives to 5 hours. Reinvest in America. Retrain our workers. Reindustrialize our nation. Research for development and reconversion from making nuclear bombs to making things that are socially useful. A peacetime economy. A peacetime economy. Well, let's go a step further because I want to make it real plain. Don't want to be misunderstood. How many of you here own or know someone who owns a VC Aura? Raise your hand. Raise your hands real high. All in the stands, raise your hand real high. There's not one American-made VC Aura, hands down. Not your fault, they just don't make them. How many of you personally own an MX missile? Raise your hand. Know why we're in debt? We're making what ain't nobody buying. If we make sense, we'll make money. And we'll make jobs. Let's make sense. We must change our priorities. If we change, we'll have revenue sharing money. We'll have community development, block grant money, but we must first have an economic policy that's about stopping drugs, saving jobs, and securing farms, and stabilizing our economy. Well, let me put it another way. A honeybee is said, Brother Raff, not to have a brain. Some say, well, honeybee got instinct or something because they keep on making other honeybees. And they don't have no slum honeybee hives. They don't close hives on other honeybees without notice. So honeybees got something going that's very intelligent. Let's watch the law the honeybee observes. It's called the law of regeneration. Honeybee gets nectar from a flower. Now, when a honeybee gets nectar, that's its source of joy and gratification. I mean, when the honeybee gets nectar, it wants to fly sideways. I mean, that's how honeybee be talking about right on. I mean, that's the real thing for honeybee, nectar, you know. But no matter how excited the honeybee is, the honeybee drops pollen where it picks up nectar. then it flies away. Because the honeybee has enough sense to know at some point in time it will get empty. And when it flies back, the flower is dead, the honeybee will die. So it drops pollen where it picks up nectar, the flower's alive, honeybee gets some more nectar, and keep on making honeybees and keep regenerating. When these corporations get their nectar from America's cities, get their first tax break, get their education, get their consumers, get their workers, they get their nectar from America, and then sow their pollen in Taiwan, South Africa, South Korea. They don't have as much sense as a honeybee, and they're killing the American economy. We must have an ethic for multinational corporations to save our citizens. There must be an economic ethic for multinational corporations. Jesse Jackson to the rescue. Can Jesse Jackson win? Well, that choice is in your hands. If I win, cities win. If I win, workers win. If I win, civil rights win. If I win, minimum wage being raised wins. If I win, America wins. If I can win, hear me, friends, any American can win. Because it means that no longer will race and sex and religion and insatiable military appetite be prerequisite for winning. If I cannot win, most Americans cannot win. And thus, in this 200th anniversary of our Constitution, let the sun shine in. Let every American win. I'm going to give you a choice. You give me a chance. Let's choose a new course. Let's build a new coalition. If I can win, any American can win. Jesse Jackson can't win. Well, if this were feudalism, and my daddy was not the king, and I was not the prince, I could never become head of state. Because by that definition, I would not have royal blood. But in America, everybody got royal blood. Every person got royal blood in our democracy. Yes, whoever gets the most votes can win. We, the people, must not hope in one direction and then vote in another. You cannot go in the hall and say, well, we like the way he talks, he acts, he fights, he speaks, he holds on, but. Don't say but, say therefore. Therefore, Jesse Jackson can win. Urban leaders, I know what a president must do. A president must set a moral tone, build an economic consensus, mold a coalition, realize humane priorities at home and human rights abroad, achieve peace and an effective foreign policy. And I read today that most of the other candidates have decided not to show up and face you. I've stood so much alone with the people in these last few years. I've become accustomed to it now. When the Haitians were washing ashore on the coast of Florida, South Africans were being shot down in the streets before our eyes. I stood alone before the Pope, asking for help and mercy. When Gorbachev met Reagan in Geneva, and some boys had to cry out, please don't test and deploy missiles. Free Soviet Jewry and fight for human rights. But Mr. Gorbachev, I stood with him, and before him, before the world. There was no crowd there. when Nakasone was dumping goods in this economy, farmers in America going out of business. And yet we cannot sell agriculture products to them in many instances. When they got a construction surplus in our country, and we could not bid on the Tokyo Bridge or the Osaka Airport, I stood before Mr. Nakasone alone. When Goodman, an American pilot, was shot down in Syria, and the president washed his hands, I stood alone before Assad, brought him back home, did not leave a cake or a Bible or a gun with Assad. I stood as a leader. As I stand before you today at the point of challenge, I'm the only candidate who has stood at the plant gate with the workers. I stood at the shipyards where goods made by slave labor undercut organized labor. I've stood at the schoolyards for youth with good minds couldn't get a scholarship, couldn't make a loan, and teacher couldn't get paid, and they drifted into drugs. I stood, and no other candidate has stood at one farm auction. And if we can bail out Chrysler and Europe and Japan, bail out the family farmer. I stood in Washington October 11th. 600,000 people gathered. 2,000 AIDS victims before my eyes, dying. Some of them were teenagers. Sons and daughters of ours, neighbors of ours, people from your cities, they sat there weeping and afraid to die and couldn't stop dying. They were hurting, pain and shame. Not another candidate would stand with them, fearing opinion polls. Don't want to get too close. You might not look presidential. Fear that some right wing might attack them on the theology of standing with folks dying with AIDS. You know AIDS are going to bankrupt our cities unless we get help at the federal level on AIDS. I was not intimidated by some right-wing attack about just standing with AIDS victims, because I read the Bible too and understand it. And I remembered the last night on earth of Jesus the Christ. He stood and slept in the quarantine shelter of Simon the leper, who had the sin sickness or the blood disease of his day. He did not embrace leprosy. He embraced the leper because it was the morally correct thing to do. I have stood with you when Teamsters had doors shut in their faces and Reagan wanted to put them in trusteeship. It was not right. I stood with the workers. And so now, my friends, I've stood with you without shame, without reservation. You stand with me. If we turn to each other, and not on each other, our cities can live again. We'll have mass transit. We'll have good schools. We'll take care of our seniors. We'll take care of our handicapped. We'll attract industry. We'll attract jobs. We'll have the alternative to welfare, jobs and education. If you stand with me, I will stand with you, and together, my friends, for the better, our nation will change. And on January 21st, 1989, I would have been president for one day, and your cities would be living again because we made the right decision. Thank you, my friends. Thank you.